that deal, I would characterize it as co-opetition. We cooperate on certain fronts and we compete on other fronts. There were merchants who didn't use Paymentech and used PayPal, and there were merchants who used Paymentech and didn't come to PayPal direct. And it depended. The type of merchant was important in the equation. But that co-opetition, both companies initially were like, we're enemies. Why would we compete? But when you looked at it, PayPal was much more of a front end and Paymentech was much more of a processor. No one knew the brand Paymentech. Everyone knew the brand. So it depended. Sometimes when you look at the equations, they look similar, but when you dig in a little, you go, oh yeah, you're more focused on this and we're more focused on that. You know what? We could cooperate, and that co-opetition is important.
Going into this process of finding new partners, you mentioned how you successfully did it in PayPal. How do you map ecosystems? Like how do you start searching for new partners?
One tip that I think is valuable is I often tell people, forget about the top 10. So here's my list of partner targets, people I would love to do deals with. In general, the top 10 are pretty happy with themselves. Life is good. They're doing okay. I mean, definitely the top 5. Maybe 5 through 10 you could talk to. But 10 through 20, pretty hungry. Pretty eager to do something different because they're not in the top 10 of whatever the vertical is. It doesn't really matter what the vertical is, right? And why do I say that? Because I know that my deal requires change on the other side. The deal didn't exist, then the deal exists. And so people are going to have to change behavior. And human history has shown that people who are fat and happy don't change very much. If you're in the top 10 or definitely in the top 5, things are pretty good. The ethos of that group tends to be, if we keep doing what we're doing, things are going to be okay. Right? Whereas people in the bottom, the 10 through 20 or the 10 through 50, they're looking for doing something different. We are not killing it. We are, and so you have to, depending on the industry, you got to decide how deep that list is. Maybe you don't talk to the top 3. Maybe you talk to number 4 and number 5. Or maybe you ignore the top 10 and you talk to 11, 12, and 13. It really depends what the curve looks like. Right? And what I mean by that is that, how fragmented is your market? Example, when you look at the currency conversion market, massively fragmented. The 800-pound gorilla, Western Union, has I think it's a 16% market share. And then MoneyGram, the next one, has 9%. And then it's a tail to forever. If you talk to number 20 in that market, that's a waste of time. You gotta, so it depends how fragmented the market is and whatnot. But the key point is talking to market leaders for brand value might be a waste of time because they're not going to change their behavior, even if you sign a deal. How much are you going to change Western Union's behavior by signing a deal with that, as an example? I mean, so you definitely want to keep in mind that the target is going to have to do things differently and going to have incentive to do things differently. So you're looking for hunger.
Very insightful point. You found this 5 to 15 or whatever, 5 to 10 or maybe 10 to 15, and then you go and you pitch to them, right? It's who do you pitch and how do you pitch? What's your thought about that?
100% of the time, you need to find a champion on the other side of the table. You need to find someone who thinks this is really good for my company and it's going to make me look good. You need to find that person in the target.
Should it be senior person, or it should be could be a little bit junior, and then you can.
9 times out of 10, the more senior, the better. But senior and lazy or young and hungry, again, same thing applies. So the senior guy doing pretty well, makes good money. There is a problem with seniority that the urge to not fuck up it grows, right? At the end of the day, people aren't trying new things, new risky things, which is why the risk appetite decreases over time. So if you're doing something that's brand new and somewhat risky, I would find a younger person, a person, not younger, a more junior person in the organization who's willing to take that risk. Again, high risk, high return, right? But I mean, that's the other thing, right? So people who have innovation in their title or digital in their title or, anything that indicates that they have a higher risk appetite is better for a deal that involves some level of risk. If it's not, if it's a volume deal, you want to find people who are driven by revenue. I mean, it depends what you're selling, but more often than not, cost avoidance does less new deals than revenue generation, right? Revenue generation is more exploratory most of the time. Sometimes you can, do cost avoidance, and that makes sense. You might be selling something that's 100% about reducing costs. I would say one warning that I see it all the time. People, I just can't get over how often I see this. I see people selling to someone a proposition that will replace them or their team. They go to a CTO and they have a proposition that says, "Oh my God, we can do this so much more efficiently. You'll need half the heads, half the engineers you have on staff now." And they think that that's good for the CTO. They need. It's like, okay, you have to understand what's driving the CTO. Maybe more heads makes him happy. Maybe that's a power thing and a pride thing, and having a large organization is good. So you went in, and so I can tell you, you close that door, you'll never hear from that person again. Stay away from me. I have a funny example. I was talking to a company that has effectively it's a better programming language, but they were pitching it like robots. They were saying you need less heads. This is a better way to do coding and maintenance and everything, and you'll need less engineers because these effectively robots. And I was like, if it's true, you're never going to sell any. I said, at the very least, the truth is you need engineers to use your software. So you're selling Iron Man suits. Tell them it's about enhancing the engineers. Like, put that you need engineers in the suit to make it work, and they were like, "Oh, right, okay, Iron Man, that's a good idea." Like, you got to remember what drives people, right? And so often you see startups. In crypto, you see crypto players selling to banks, and they're saying the message is often, "We'll do immediate, global, free transactions." Like, that's the pitch. That's like the worst thing a banker ever heard. Their entire model is based on slow, expensive transactions. A bank, any global bank, has no interest in money moving instantly around the planet for free. That's bad. That's really bad. And you get these crypto guys talking to bankers like, "Oh, they should want to replace their back end systems and Swift and wire transfers and money transfer. They should want to replace all that because they can do it better." And I'm like, that makes no sense at all. Like a bank does not want that to become true because you just eliminated their whole thing.
Absolutely, I agree. Look, just going back to this innovation, people sometimes they are just absolutely amazing, and I had a chance to deal with many of them. But some of them are just kind of screening a bunch of startups, and they kind of ticking a bunch of boxes, saying, "Hey, we screened like this many startups." So how do you avoid this type of behavior?
They have to be driving revenue, right? Their remit has to be revenue. Their remit, you do not want to do deals with scientists. Like, that's you know what I mean? Like, it can't just be experimentation for experimentation's sake or learning for learning's sake. It has to be, that they have a bottom line objective, right? And you can explore that. You can find that out in conversations. So past deals, how much have you driven to the bottom line? You can just ask. This is the other thing. You need to be very willing as a biz dev person to be curious, really, really curious. Like, you got to be asking questions. The 80-20 has to be 80% listening and 20% talking, right? You need to be asking questions to dig out what's driving the behavior, right? Why do they do what they do? How are they measured for success? What are they looking to grow their organization's headcount? I mean, sometimes an innovation guy in an organization has three people and they're like, yeah, no, I'm trying to grow the team. Like, I want the team to be, well, and you're not going to grow the team unless you drive bottom line results, right? Blah, blah, blah. So you need to dig and listen a lot, and people will tell you. I mean, the other interesting thing to me is people aren't bashful about telling you what they need or want. If you ask them, they're happy to tell you. If you don't ask, they might not tell you.
Sometimes you don't want to ask because you don't want to hear his answer. So you're like, maybe I. So like, what are other questions that you typically ask? I think you just mentioned a couple of them, which are great. Is there any like things that you would ask and kind of wait for like for an answer?
I mean, going back a step, everything's based on trust, and deals are based on trust, right? And so you want to get to know the person personally. Hey, what did you do this weekend? We went to, explain what you did. Like, you want to find common ground and build trust on an interpersonal level. And then once you have that interpersonal trust where the person you're doing a deal with looks forward to talking to you. I mean, my first major deal at PayPal took a year. And the guy I did the deal with, never forget, Kevin Gallagher, great guy. We became friends. We're friends, and we were trying to do this deal for our companies. And you, like, when you do significant deals, you should become friends with the person you do deals with. Usually, not all the time, but you want to have an interpersonal relationship in some regard. And then secondarily, you'll start to learn what drives them. Sometimes it's status in the organization. Sometimes it's bottom line revenue. Sometimes it's impressing their immediate boss. But you'll never get there if you don't have. I mean, we use the phrase like loosen people up. Like the way you loosen people up is them having a comfort level with you, right? I mean, that is why sales guys take prospects to drinks. It's as simple as that. Lunch and drinks loosens the tongue.
It's a little bit more difficult to do that on Zoom these days, but yeah.
Totally. In fact, I honestly, I've said a number of times now, like, there's going to be a huge challenge moving forward where people go, wait, so why are you coming to town? Like, it's fine. We can just do a Zoom. We're fine. We don't need to. The prospect side of the equation is going to start to say, A, I'm not coming into my office. B, you're not coming to my house. C, Zoom is totally fine. We'll just have a conversation. And a bunch of sales guys are sweating. They're like, oh shit, like, because the way I build relationships is over a meal. We break bread with one another to build relationships. And what is building relationships? Building relationships is building trust.
After a short break, we are back. Let's imagine that you found like your, like a person that you want to engage, hungry person. You pitch them and then kind of push it back. So you start to negotiate, right? So there's an argument being made that in some ways partnership is about like legalese, right? All this contracts and like details and figuring out like what are the small things and so on. So how do you negotiate in partnerships? What do you think are important, and like what is the best practice you consider there?
I mean, one danger thing I would say is trying to pass the relationship over to the lawyers, this sort of thing, right? Like you definitely see situations where the commercial agreement has been made. Like, okay, we're doing it. This is what we want to do. Let's put it, let's get it onto paper. And then the lawyers are, they fight amongst themselves and they want to justify their existence and can really garf up a deal if you let them, right? So I think it's important that biz dev people become the advocates for their partner in conversations with their own lawyers, right? So you need to be talking to the lawyers like, oh, we need this, we have this in all of our agreements or whatever. May or may not be true, but you have to be the one fighting on behalf of the client. So the client has their things, you have your things. You have to say, look, is this really that important to us? Or are we going to crater the deal over this? right? I'm not saying you shouldn't negotiate hard and push back where appropriate, but I have seen deals fall apart because of stuff that really wasn't significant, but it was a legal thing where it's like, no, we don't get that, we don't do the deal, right? Um, that's one aspect I would say. Um, the other is there's much more to negotiate than money, right? So there's the press release, there's brand interaction. Is there when we go to market, is it side by side as brands? Is it my brand doesn't exist and your brand does? Is it your brand powered by my brand? Is it, like there's all sorts of, there's exclusivity or lack of exclusivity depending on your perspective. There's milestones, like the more material milestones you can build into the agreements, the better. By the way, better for everyone. And why is it better for everyone? It's better for everyone because the more you articulate what your mutual expectations are, the happier everyone's going to be, right? Like the more that's left up to your imagination, then it means, well, Roman was thinking that and Rory was thinking this. Oh my gosh, we didn't think that in advance, right? And it also incentives, right? So sometimes one group's incentive is volume and the other group's incentive is profit. And that's got to be clear, right? So in other words, one will charge a higher price for a lower volume. The other one's like, screw price. I want to drive as much volume as possible. Blah, 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 right? And this is my point, is that you want to articulate all of the factors that you can in the contract. And by the way, you don't want to do too many. I mean, you don't want to make it unbearable so that there's so much in the contract that it's hard to understand the agreement. But the material elements of time and money and brand and et cetera, like you want to be clear about those and not have it be left up to someone's imagination. Because that's the other problem is, so you and I do an agreement and we understand each other. We understand what we want. It was all clear. And then I pass it into my organization and you pass it into your organization. Now you're playing a big game of telephone. Oh, I thought you said Tuesday, blah, 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 whatever. Like, it's worth it for both parties to have sort of crib notes, to have sort of an abbreviated version of the key material terms of the agreement when you go into execution mode, right? To get it done as expected. Right? You don't want, your engineers, my engineers, some third party integration part who just garfs it up because they just didn't understand,
No, definitely. What's your view on exclusivity? And then like in terms of milestones and timeframes, you mentioned that the first deal took like you for almost like a year in PayPal. Like when should be the first milestone, time-wise, from the beginning of like of a partnership?
I look at deals not unlike I look at startups, right? You should kind of have a minimum viable product that you can get live as quickly as possible. I mean, if it's between signing and live, if it's a long time, that's bad for everybody as well. You would love to have partnerships and integrations that can go to market in stages. And the stages could be different. It could be executional stages. It could be vertical stages. We're going to start on the West Coast, and then we're going to expand to the US, then we're going to expand to North America, then we're going to go into Europe, blah, blah, blah. Geographic. It could be depth of the engagement, right? So we're going to start with this proposition, but then we're going to expand further into your footprint and further into my footprint. And so it might be product could be stages, this stage of the product, that stage of the product. Like I think of it like serving Thanksgiving dinner. If you put Thanksgiving dinner out and there's no plates, no one can eat anything, right? You need to plate it. You need to cut it into bite-sized pieces that people can then get their head around and execute on. And there's just no scenario where large contracts, large agreements between parties just go from 0 to 100 immediately, right? You gotta have a path of acceleration, and it is important to the success of deals sometimes that's very clear. Like, here's what we're going to start with within, as of 2 months from signing, we're going to launch XYZ. And then at the end of the quarter, we'll be doing this and blah, blah, blah. And, and also try and think of some worst case scenarios. Like, if this isn't working, we're going to reevaluate at this point, and we'll see what we can do to accommodate all this kind of stuff, right? So again, you're not going to be able to predict the future 100%, but the more you can anticipate and the more you can set mutual expectations, the better it is for everybody.
Yeah, that's great. But about exclusivity,
I'm a Silicon Valley guy, right? Like I speed mattered. Speed mattered a ton in my space. And because speed mattered, a period of exclusivity was sometimes very valuable. People want to be associated with a brand in advance of someone else being associated with that brand, right? And so it can be a powerful resource. It can be powerful on two fronts. One, brand power, but two, speed to market. I've never done a deal that was mutually exclusive for forever. They always are time limited in some regard. And the tighter the time period, the more I tend to think of it like jet fuel, right? You're accelerating the deal by giving people a period of exclusivity in which to perform, right? So we're not going to do any other channel deals for the first year of this deal, and in that period you get XYZ compensation. And then after that period, we're going to have other deals come live, and your profitability is going to go down or whatever. And that drives. I mean, people, the people who did the deal, who signed the deal, recognize, okay, this is going to be very valuable. And it also, I mean, it depends on the vertical and the cost of changing. Sometimes it's a race to the elbow, and the early adopter is going to win. And so that exclusivity period is very important. As an example, of PayPal and merchant services, when an online merchant, an e-commerce merchant, does a payments integration, they don't want to do it again. Right? Like, no one wants to integrate twice or reintegrate to a new provider. So that was a race. Like, whoever's bringing the merchants on board is going to get a cut for a long time. So you don't want to goof that up, right? Like, you want to use exclusivity as a tool.
that is fantastic. Two last questions, I guess. Number one is that well, when you start thinking about partnerships, like and you advise startups, do you prioritize different partnerships? So, for example, you would say, we should start with integrations or referral or channel, or maybe you don't even think in these terms at all.
You'd like to find someone who already sells to your customer. Like, so as I said, trust is commutable, right? So as an early startup who has no brand and is an unknown entity, it's much better to, if you can readily identify, okay, here's my customer, here's what they look like. If you can readily identify people who sell to that partner, to that customer, you'd much rather go to them and give them a lot of value. I mean, they're providing a lot of value in trust. Right? So in the first, when they refer a new customer, give them 100% of the profit. Say, you bring me a new customer, I'm giving you 100% profit on that transaction, right? Because that brand value and the commutability of trust is extremely valuable and hard to replicate, right? So you'd rather hire mercenaries, in other words, someone else's salesperson, than build your own army and give them value for the value provided. I mean, that's the thing I tell people most of the time.
Quick comment. I love the idea of scaling trust and actually front loading value. I think this is like two great concepts that you just shared. Thank you so much. So my last question is like about how this is changing, right? This entire dynamic of business development and partnerships, is it changing at all, like over the years, or maybe it's kind of the same, just kind of repackaged in different ways?
Yeah, I do remember my second thing, and I will answer that question. My second thing is co-opetition. So cooperation, competition. So very, very often you'll find that two companies who thought that they were competitive. So my first huge deal at PayPal was with a company called Paymentech. And when I first suggested it, and Paymentech at that point, this is in 2003, was doing literally half of e-commerce volume. The one company was processing, they're a huge company. They got bought by Chase. So now it's Chase Paymentech. But Paymentech was this company focused on online, 2003, early days of the web, doing massive amounts of card volume. And I said, okay, we are a payment type, Amex, Visa, MasterCard, PayPal. We should be in the menu. When you go to Paymentech to accept card payments online, PayPal should be we should be a box. Tick the box. Do you want to accept Visa? Yes. MasterCard? Yes. PayPal? Yes. When I suggested that at PayPal, people are like, Paymentech's the competition. People are going to use us instead of Paymentech. I'm like, yeah, maybe, but Paymentech also wants access to our volume, right? Like, so, and so literally that deal, I would characterize it as co-opetition. We cooperate on certain fronts and we compete on other fronts. There were merchants who didn't use Paymentech and used PayPal, and there were merchants who used Paymentech and didn't come to PayPal direct. And it depended. The type of merchant was important in the equation. But that co-opetition, both companies initially were like, we're enemies. Why would we compete? But when you looked at it, PayPal was much more of a front end and Paymentech was much more of a processor. No one knew the brand Paymentech, and everyone knew the brand. Like, so it depended. Sometimes when you look at the equations, they look similar, but when you dig in a little, you go, oh yeah, you're more focused on this and we're more focused on that. You know what? We could cooperate. And that co-opetition is important. The last thing is, as you said, how's BizDev changing? I mean, I think one way that BizDev is changing is that everyone is building to APIs, right? Everyone is building to integrate. The concept of integration has migrated over the years, right? So back, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, integration, bespoke, unique, pain in the ass. Like once partners integrated, no one ever wanted to do that again. Now, everything is built with a mind to plug and play. Like Zoom has opened up its API and says, yeah, come build on my platform, right? The concept of platform, network, API, open services, web services, that has evolved to the point where you gotta maintain your relationship. BizDev used to be, we do the deal and then you send it into the organization and the deal will last forever. And that is not true anymore. You can sell to people who have integrated with your competition already, and vice versa is also true, that if you don't take care of your relationships with your partners that you built through BizDev, they can swap you out quicker and quicker every day. And that means that, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is BizDev and account management have to get closer and closer, such that as a BizDev person, part of your responsibility is to maintain that momentum and be sure that you're not neglecting the relationship, because it's really easy to do new integration.
Yeah, but also like one thing that I also see in some organizations now that products become more and more integrated. Essentially, this business development and partnership people kind of get kind of more voice, right? Because they become more important for actually top line revenue.
Yeah, I mean, no question that because integration is easier, you can do more and more partnerships, right? Like it's just easier to get them done. It no longer takes a year to integrate two offerings, right? Now it's more often the case that both organizations are designed to go to market through channels and partnerships, and integration is easy. I mean, it becomes way more plug and play, which is a plus and a minus. They can switch from you quicker, but they also integrate to you quicker, right? So, it's a double-edged sword, as they like to say.
Awesome, Roy. It's been fantastic interview. A couple of things that I kind of took away is, again, like front loading value, and then scaling trust, and not doing partnership for the sake of PR is like a couple of things that I think are quite compelling. What is the best way for folks like to reach out to you? Is it like LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn is fine. I mean, Roy Vela at anything gets to me. Roy Vela. LinkedIn, it's linkedin.com/Roy Vela, Roy Vela at Gmail, Roy Vela on Twitter. It's just take my name, eliminate the space, and you can find me in no time.
I hope that we'll do like series 2 sometime, but for now, I really appreciate your time and looking forward to it.
My pleasure, Roman. Good to talk to you.